we pray. Eternal God, our Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for Thy countless mercies, which we too often take for granted in the haste and hurry of our living. We thank Thee for all which Thou hast given and for all which Thou hast forgiven. Wilt Thou illumine our insights with love, that we may believe the best and have the patience to persevere in attaining it. Make us sensitive to the virtues which often lie hid in others, that we may feel the surge of kindness and the impulse of mercy. Wilt Thou make us humble with the thought of what others have done for us, and enlarge our vision of what we can do for others. Fill our minds with ennobling thoughts and our hearts with quickening sympathy, that all whose lives we touch may be left stronger by our influence. And as we dedicate this beautiful and functional library building, may we be reminded constantly that it is here that the student will keep company with the great in all ages and the good in all lands. We thank Thee for books, which are the ever-burning lamps of accumulated wisdom, the miraculous memories of high thoughts and golden moods. We thank Thee for lofty thoughts which will not let us rest in low desires. Our Father, help us live under the compulsion of the highest imperative. And may we understand that freedom is not the right to do as we please, but the opportunity to please, to do what is right. And, O God, wilt Thou strengthen the bonds that unite us and weaken the barriers that divide us, that the highest good of all peoples may be served and the spirit of peace may pervade the world. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
I know that you would want me to express our appreciation to the choir and to Mr. Anderson, and also, of course, to Mr. Wagner, the business manager, who has just given the invocation. Now, I think, so that you'll understand the next step on the program, that we should report to you that this is a sort of a tradition at Ball State Teachers College. Whenever we have the opportunity to dedicate a new building or an addition to the building, we involve those personalities that have had a major part in the development of the building and charge each with a new responsibility. So we shall proceed through this part of the program without an announcement or a presentation of each individual. But I'll tell you something about them, and then we shall proceed with this particular part of the ceremony. Mr. Walter Scholler Sr. is the architect. And of course, he is the man who puts our dreams and our ideas into brick and stone and mortar and divides them up into classrooms and tells us about the kind of equipment and arranges with contractors and with subcontractors to see that the building as it's supervised is finally completed and ready for use. Governor Craig was unable to be with us this evening, and he has sent as his representative the director of the budget, Mr. Don Clark, who will accept the building then from the architect. Edward B. Robb, Jr. is the president of the State Teachers College Board, and on behalf of the board, he will accept the building. He will then, of course, present the building to those of us here at Ball State Teachers College represented by yours truly. Then it will be my opportunity to present it to Miss Grady. The presentation is made through the presentation of a symbolic key. I think you'll be interested. It was designed by one of the young men in our Industrial Arts Department and completed there, ready for this evening. We shall now proceed with this dedication ceremony. Mr. Scholler.
Dr. Emmons, honored guests, friends of Ball State. It is an honor to represent all those who had a part in the planning and construction of the new library wing on this dedication day. On this occasion, it is perhaps appropriate to compare briefly early efforts and facilities for education in Indiana with the present. Looking backward, the early facilities were mainly the one-room school and the subjects, the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. It is interesting to note that reading was first on the list and considered the more important. Today, in the modern advanced era, reading, with its many associated aids, is still, I believe, considered the more important, and the library the more important center for study. As the new library wing is being dedicated, it is a pleasant privilege to present the keys that open the doors of the structure to you, Mr. Clark, representing the governor, as a symbol of further progress in the educational system of Indiana. Don.
Thank you, Mr. Scholler, President Emmons, members of the Board of Trustees, ladies and gentlemen. Governor Craig regretted very much that he could not be here and wished that I express his sincere appreciation to all of you who have participated in the construction and planning of this building. He feels that this is a step forward for both Ball State and the state of Indiana. We're primarily concerned with the dollars involved, and the state's responsibility was best defined by our first state constitution, written in Corydon in 1816. Roughly, it said that an orderly system of education was to be established from the grades through a university. The university mentioned in our Constitution has in reality become 4. Today, there are more people enrolled in higher education in state institutions in Indiana than made up the entire population of that territory back in 1816. The student population at Ball State today is probably greater than all of the college enrollment of the United States in 1816. The change here in recent years, insofar as the student body is concerned, is a tremendous one. From 1935, with approximately 1,300 students, to more than 4,300 today. And that is but a small sign of what is to be in the future. The state's responsibility is very great. The need for funds will be increasingly greater as the enrollment continues to increase. According to President Emmons, the increase this year is approximately 500 students. By 1965 or 1970, Ball State could have an enrollment between 8,000 and 10,000 students. That sounds like a very, very large institution compared to what we have had in the past. But we find that many factors enter into that. First, there is an increased percentage of the college-age people who are now going to college. And of course, we have an increase in the total number of people that age. That increase is going to continue for the next several years. About 6 years ago, the heads of our state schools worked out what they thought would be a very desirable construction program. It was to continue for approximately 10 years about $8 million each year would, in their opinion at that time, have been sufficient to meet the needs that they could foresee. The $80 million program that they set up was not started on the basis of $8 million per year. Fortunately, for the last 4 years, the General Assembly has appropriated $30 million, so we're only $2 million off the program for 4 years. But in the earlier biennium, the General Assembly didn't appropriate that much, so that we are running a little bit behind on this program. But the tremendous increase in enrollment was not anticipated in its entirety. Another factor that enters into it is the fact that the dollar will buy a smaller amount of goods today than it would at the time they made their estimate. I know that the boards of trustees, the presidents, and the other officials at our schools are now at work trying to conservatively and accurately revise their requirements. There is going to be a great need for additional state dollars for the next few years if we're going to meet our responsibility of providing a cultural environment where Hoosier students can obtain their education. The completion of the east wing of the library is an important step toward meeting the needs of not only the present, but also of the future. But many more steps remain to be taken. Mr. Robb, as President of the Board of Trustees, the state of Indiana charges you with the responsibility of obtaining the maximum value from this new building.
Mr. Clark, President Emmons, and friends of Ball State, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the State Teachers Colleges of Indiana, I assure you that it's a happy event for us to accept this symbol of your new milestone in the progress of Ball State. I wish to assure all of you that the board is well aware of the dynamic future for Ball State Teachers College. We're also well aware of the demands that are going to be made in the future for the training of teachers who can go out and provide an education within the needs of the state of Indiana for the growing future population. We, I'm sure, are planning things which some of you are aware of for the development of the campus here. We hope that we wisely and judiciously spend your money because it is the state's money. And frankly, I shudder when I think of what it costs these days to add to the facilities that are necessary. But we are charged with that responsibility, and I think most everyone agrees that it is a primary responsibility of the state of Indiana to provide an education for the future citizens of this great state. Now it's my privilege, President Emmons, to pass this on to you, and I know that you will use this additional facility to its fullest extent throughout the years to come.
First, I should like to express appreciation to the members of the State Teachers College Board for their continued interest in the program which we are attempting to develop to meet the needs of the young men and young women who come to Ball State Teachers College. The members of the board that are here this evening include 4 people. They've come from distant places. One has made a trip across the country to be here for this particular occasion. So I should like to present the members of the board to you. Just heard from the president, Ed Robb. Mrs. Oscar Algren from Whiting, Indiana, who is a member of the State Teachers College Board. Mr. Alex Bracken from Muncie, who is a member of the board, and Mr. Wilbur Young, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, who is directly from Oregon today. And we should like also to express our appreciation to those representatives of the Indiana Assembly who are here this evening, and indirectly through them or directly through them to the other members of our legislature who have appropriated the funds, approximately $750,000, to make this addition to our library a part of this institutional program. I remember saying something like this to our assembly, first assembly for all college students this fall, that it's possible on a college campus for any student to reach out and to tap the total accumulated culture of all the experience that man has had down to date through our library facilities. I think this key is symbolic of a key that will unlock doors that otherwise are closed to individuals. Any individual, by turning this symbolic key, can obtain any information that has ever been accumulated that we sometimes call the cultural accretion of man. This is not merely the key to a storehouse, but this is a key to a service agency. This is a key that opens rooms in which people can find, if they so desire, the stored information available to us in this generation. In addition, this particular facility houses not merely books and printed materials, but all types of materials that we now call audio-visual aids or other kinds of aids. Movies, film strips, recordings, pictures, art objects, and all other types of media of communication. There are some unique features about it. I'm wondering if you all know that in our library, any student may borrow a picture which may be hung in his room and kept for a quarter, or any faculty member, so far as that is concerned, just as easily as one can borrow a book. A person who wants to teach a class, we'll say, about Mexico City, can step into a one-service or a one-stop service station and find the books and the periodicals, the recordings, the film strips, the movies, the handled objects such as dolls, the art objects, all from this particular location, can take them to the classroom, or the faculty member can bring the students from the classroom to the library and have these things made available to them by the librarians who are available and ready to serve. Now I'm presenting this symbolic key to Miss Grady. Dr. Grady is our librarian. I should like to also have you know that Miss Barkus Titchener, the librarian emeritus, is here. And I should like to have, when Marion stands, Miss Titchener stand, and also all members of the library staff, because it seems to me a little unfair to just charge Miss Grady with the full responsibility for this service. So Marion, will you step up? Miss Titchener, will you stand? And will all the members of the library staff who are here this evening please stand, wherever you may be. I present you the key, and I charge you and your staff with the responsibility of servicing the needs of the faculty members and the students today and in the future on the Ball State campus.
We of the library staff accept this challenge with pleasure. You've already heard that we have students on the campus. In fact,
It's been very interesting that each year for the last 3 years we have absorbed 500 additional students each year. I was interested in the remark about the enrollments in colleges. My memory serves me correctly, the largest institution of higher education in this country 100 years ago today was Yale University with 381 students. The last 3 years, each one of those last 3 years, we've absorbed a student body larger than the total enrollment in the largest institution of higher education in this country some 100 years ago. We appreciate the cooperative effort of students on this campus, and we know that they would like to have something to say about the library facilities. So the president of the Student Council, Rini Shu, will now express appreciation from the student body. Rini.
It is certainly my pleasure to express on behalf of the student body our feelings about this new building. I don't suppose there is any building on campus which is so well known to a student by the time he graduates as the library. When we enter here as a freshman, one of the first courses we're in is orientation, and while there we are instructed in the use of the library. We take this knowledge and make use of it, and as the days and months and years of our college life fly by, the library becomes a pretty familiar place. There are card files for this class, term papers for that, critical reports to do, and many, many more things that we use the library. In all of these, of course, the library is a pretty important place. The old library wing was nice, and although it was a bit crowded during float periods and at night, we thought it sufficient. But when the new wing was completed and we had the opportunity to use it, we took advantage of it. We like to go there and study now because it's lighter and roomier. We like its casual quality, too. It's easier to find the materials we want for student teaching, participation, and just plain classwork. We like the looks of it, both inside and out. We, the students, have tried to show our appreciation of this building in the best way we know how, by using the facilities provided by the new wing. We are proud of our campus and its growth, and to us, the new library wing is a symbol of that growth, and we're sincerely glad to have it here.
A college is measured not by how fast it grows or by the number of buildings it has, nor by the beauty of its campus. In the final analysis, it's measured by the success of its alumni. We're very happy to have the president of the Alumni Association here this evening, Fred Moore Hinshaw, who needs no introduction to a monthly audience. Fred.
Thank you, Dr. Emmons. Alumni appreciation of this structure is not confined to the vicarious experience of the second and third generations. More and more graduates of this and other colleges are returning here to continue their studies, to find in the admirable facilities in this library aids with which to increase their value to the youth of the nation and to the communities in which they live. A graduate study room, by the way, close to books, periodicals, and papers of significance, is an important part of these 40,000 square feet to the east of us. We alumni certainly owe a great debt to the college administration, state officials down through the years, and members of the General Assembly for their foresight. The needs of the college have been anticipated and met as soon as practically possible. We know that here at Ball State we are turning out educated people, individuals with the insight to estimate the situation, the intellect to grasp the tools, and the initiative to do the job. The library seems to symbolize in some way the sum of human experience which is made available to the student in a modern college. Bricks, mortar, metal, wood, and glass house intangibles which are far more precious than form can express. We've built here much more than a building. Perhaps it's suitable to try to bring some appreciation by taking the building blocks and mortar of words and phrases to form a verse. That's an expression men have used for ages to evoke more emotion than the prose sentence can carry. These two quatrains
contain a part of what Ball State alumni may feel at this important addition to the college library. We came here curious and young, and through the years sought and found in books, in words and song, verities from past times and other lands. We thought and read, debated right and wrong. Older and slower now falters the search. We find dismayed the cloth of youth is torn, but still we return in age and awe to see the immortal shell in which our hopes were born. Thank you.
Another one of the traditions of our dedicatory programs is that we bring an individual who has had a distinguished career in the field related most nearly to the building which we are dedicating. In this instance, of course, then it would be an individual who has a distinguished career in the field of library and library science. And our speaker this evening is Dr. Leon Karnofsky, who has had a very distinguished career in this area. He has a bachelor's degree from Missouri in a library certificate program from St. Louis University and his doctor's degree from the University of Chicago. He served and has experience in the field of library science as a library assistant at St. Louis University, as an instructor to an associate professor, and finally as a professor at the University of Chicago. He's been a visiting lecturer in several places, including the University of California from 37 to 39. He's had a very interesting experience in surveying and appraising libraries across the country. Public libraries at Cleveland, Greensboro, Los Angeles, and other cities, and college and university libraries such as DePaul, Michigan State University, the New York State Libraries, and additional ones. In addition to that, he's what somebody might call, instead of a traveling library, a traveling librarian. He was a Carnegie Fellow, 29 to 31, had a Fulbright Award in France in 51, was a consultant to the United States Army of Occupation in Germany, the UNESCO service and consultant as a librarian in England, an educational mission to Japan in 1946, and he was a technical assistant on a mission in Israel, which ended in 1954. A traveling librarian. He's an author. I shan't mention the things that he's written. It's too long a list to tell you about. He might better speak to you. He's an editor. In fact, he is the editor of the Quarterly of the American Library Association. A distinguished career in library service. It's my pleasure to present to you this evening for the dedicatory address Dr. Leon Karnofsky of the University of Chicago.
President Emmons, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. About 20 years ago, the entire civilized world was shocked by a news item out of Nazi Germany. They were burning the books. These were not books of a trivial or transitory nature. On the contrary, they were the books which had had an influence on the human mind and spirit. Books by writers who had dared to think otherwise. Books which praised or even appraised other governmental systems. Books whose authors were Negroes, Jews, or other Germans like Thomas Mann, who eloquently opposed the Nazi system, or like Remarque, whose All Quiet on the Western Front seemed too pacifistic for the Nazi propagandists. Yet it was not because of the significance of these books that the world was shocked. It was rather because the book itself, as a symbol of the human spirit, was being dragged from its pedestal and humiliated, as though one had kicked the Statue of Liberty or deliberately trampled on the flag. In this country, we reacted from our shock in various ways. But in general, we ranged from a rather smug feeling that such things could not possibly happen here to a concern that they better not happen here. American librarians, whose whole reason for being lies in getting people to read, unanimously adopted a Bill of Rights that reaffirmed the right of anyone to read anything he wanted, and that specifically rejected the proposition that one's race, religion, nationality, or unorthodoxy should dictate the policy of book buying or book distribution. In 1939, when the Library Bill of Rights was first written, this was easy. It was so much in line with what Americans took for granted that no one raised any objection. Even in 1954, when some people doubted the wisdom of such freedom to read, the American Library Association reaffirmed its position and even more strongly asserted its loyalty to a fundamental tenet of the American tradition. Though there probably are a few timid librarians and members of library boards, overwhelmingly among the library profession, the freedom to read remains an endemic principle of library practice. In 1955, as in 1935, we are repelled by the suggestion that perhaps some books ought to be burned, or, what amounts to the same thing, hidden away, ignored, or denied to the curious mind. The principle of the free press is based not on the theory that it doesn't make any difference what anyone reads, but rather that it does make a difference, and that in the long run there is infinitely more to be gained by the clash of opinion, by the opportunity to weigh opposing arguments, than by any program of indoctrination on the one hand or suppression on the other. Or, in the trenchant phrase of Justice Holmes, the ultimate good desired is better reached by free trade in ideas. This, however, is only part of the story. Loyal as we may be to free trade in ideas, the concept takes on meaning only to the extent that we take advantage of the opportunity to weigh conflicting claims. We are continually hounded by the printing press, the soapbox, the radio, the television screen, and we can hardly be blamed if in the resulting confusion we succumb to the most persuasive rather than the most logical. The competition of ideas in the marketplace sadly deteriorates into a contest between advertising men, with you and me as the ultimate stakes. It is a supreme paradox of our times that, faced with a greater opportunity than the world has ever known to get a message published or released, we are unable to take it in. That is, to weigh it, consider it, discount it, and ultimately appraise it at its real worth. The book, so long regarded as the ideal receptacle for the dissemination of ideas, more prolific than ever before, is unheeded and unsought. All of us are guilty of burning books. We do it not with a flame, but by sheer neglect. What is the role of the library in this situation? As it always has been, it remains today that of preserving for contemporary use books which reflect the intellectual heritage of the past. But today, even more than formerly, it has the job of combating the shrill cries of the propagandist to lead the public to understanding. This it does principally by making available as many of the significant books of the day as its budget can stand. Few libraries, public or academic, enjoy such generous support as to permit their purchasing virtually everything. Therefore, the vast majority must carefully balance one title against another, spending their funds on books of value as well as interest. For a library which is merely popular and nothing else would be no more deserving of consideration as an educational, opinion-forming agency than the corner rental library. And the library which is devoted to preserving books which nobody reads is dead. The successful library is one which charts its course between these two extremes, neither yielding to the siren voice of easy popularity, nor limiting its acquisitions to the most profound works of scholarship. The library which conceives its role to be that of contributing to an informed, but not directed, public opinion is doing no more than following in the pattern laid down by George Washington in his farewell address. In proportion as the structure of government gives force to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. Promote, then, as an object of primary importance, institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge. I have here stressed the book as the instrument of enlightenment, and undoubtedly the book, essentially in its present form, will continue to be the library's principal means to this end. But increasingly, in recent years, we have come to recognize that print may be supplemented by other devices for the spread of ideas and the development of taste. Indeed, for some purposes, the printed word may be altogether inadequate. Consider music, for example. No volume, however profound or scholarly, can substitute for listening to Verdi's Requiem or the great symphonies. No discourse on Leonardo da Vinci can ever give the lift one derives from the paintings or works of sculpture themselves, or even from their reproductions. Extend this idea to recordings of Robert Frost reading his poetry, or Winston Churchill his great speeches, or professors like Enrico Fermi expounding their theories and discoveries. It is a tribute to this library that it has not been grudging in its recognition that education does not depend on books alone, and that it has been in the forefront among the nation's libraries in supplementing its book collection with a wide variety of materials which at one time might have been considered unconventional at the least, or even contrary to sound library policy. Thus we find in this library, brought together by its able and imaginative administrator, Miss Grady, and her distinguished predecessor, Miss Titchener, large collections of films, records, pictures, poetry readings, tape recordings, and similar devices to aid in understanding and to stimulate appreciation. The students of Ball State Teachers College are indeed fortunate to be favored with a wealth of materials such as our forefathers never dreamed of, and which even today are rarely found in the libraries of the world. With all this, the book has not been disregarded. For most purposes, it still remains preeminent as an aid to educational achievement. But no library, however rich in resources, can do much more than facilitate their use. Through handsome and commodious quarters, through its catalogs and indexes, through its trained personnel. The real impetus must come from the potential audience, from you and me. One sometimes gets the impression that library use is in inverse ratio to the ease of accessibility. As our physical facilities improve, their use diminishes. The visitor to European academic libraries cannot fail to be impressed by the earnestness and zeal with which these libraries are used. In spite of poor light, inadequate heating frequently provided by an evil-smelling kerosene or charcoal brazier, and restrictions on book borrowing that American libraries would never dream of imposing. I have seen such libraries in Europe, Japan, and the Near East, yet every seat was occupied by a serious reader, and other students were waiting for a chair to be vacated. We in this country are blessed with the finest library facilities to be found anywhere, and it is easy to understand the envy with which the visitor from abroad regards us. Yet the fact remains that too many of us ignore our opportunities, and if this is true of the student group, it is infinitely more so of the general public. A few years ago, a Gallup survey led to the conclusion that despite our mass education and high degree of literacy, the United States has the lowest proportion of book readers of any major democracy. England ranked highest, with well over half of her adult population reading some book or novel at the time the survey was conducted. Norway came next, then Canada, then Australia and Sweden, and the United States brought up the rear with only 1 adult in 5 reading books. What is responsible for this vast indifference to books? Partly, I think, it is due to a lack of interest in ideas, in history, in art and literature. And to the extent that this is so, it constitutes an indictment of our educational system. Book reading is not the only measure of intelligent awareness, but surely a society in which books are unimportant is one which compromises its claims to intellectual maturity. Professor Merrill Curti, in his book, The Growth of American Thought, writes that the decades between Jackson and Lincoln witnessed an extraordinary development in the spread of ideas and knowledge among the people. Their desire to know, to share more fully in the life of the mind, reflected an awareness of their growing power, their potentialities. Such a mood seems sadly lacking today, and in spite of our great material prosperity and progress, this lack must be a cause for deep regret. Our leadership in the possession of the material things of life is certainly cause for considerable pride, but the emphasis has exacted its price. During the last 3 decades, the widespread development of the automobile and moving picture, the radio and television, has contributed immeasurably to our pleasures and comforts. But the very multiplicity of these goods has resulted in a competition for the time of the individual, a competition in which such undramatic pursuits as reading tend to lose out. With the coming of television, our public libraries experienced a drastic reduction in use. This in spite of the fact that population had increased and the libraries were better than ever. We cannot say whether or not or how long this trend toward reduced library reading will continue. There does seem to be some evidence that it is only temporary, and that book reading returns once the novelty of the new television set has worn off. On the other hand, we are told that the widespread use of color television is imminent, and pleasant as that may be to contemplate, it is likely to distract us once more from reading. Still, the picture is not all quite so gloomy as these remarks have painted it. For radio and television have themselves made a distinct and important contribution to the spread of ideas and information, and have been instrumental in stimulating much reading that might otherwise never have been done. As a matter of fact, we have found that thanks to television, the reading of the transitory, time-passing sort has suffered most heavily, and serious reading tends to hold its own. I do not mean to imply that we are about to witness a spectacular renaissance in intellectual or artistic pursuits, or even to exhibit a lively curiosity along cultural and scientific lines such as this country experienced in the early 19th century, characterized by the emergence of the common man in the post-Jacksonian period. But it is a matter of some significance that a good part of our adult population is not content to devote all of its leisure to simple entertainment, and is becoming increasingly interested in the serious consideration of ideas. Not even color television can compete with the satisfactions derived from a good book. Another recent development of tremendous significance is the paper-bound book. This in itself is a direct result of technological progress. The application of the high-speed printing press, formerly used almost exclusively for magazines, to book publication, the development of new binding techniques, and the use of the magazine distributing network. Since the end of the war, the paper-bound industry has enormously expanded, and its annual output is numbered in the hundreds of millions of books. Instead of relying for their distribution on the traditional bookstore, so sadly deficient in the American scene, the paper-bounds reach us through newsstands, drugstores, supermarkets, and the like. And today there is hardly a whistle stop without some books for sale. True enough, most of the titles are trash, but not all by any means, and the number of available works in history, literature, poetry, and philosophy is quite impressive. If what is available determines our reading choices, we may contemplate something of a surge in the amount of reading, much of it of a substantial sort. But once more we must interject a word of caution in interpreting these hopeful signs. For accessibility is meaningless in the absence of a will to read. Art galleries and symphony orchestras will attract only people who are interested in art and music. And good books, regardless of their inexpensiveness or even availability without charge, as in our libraries, depend for their punch on persons interested enough to read them. How do we develop such interest? Clearly, our schools and colleges must assume the burden here as in so many other areas. They have done a magnificent job in making us a literate nation. They have been less successful in implanting a lifelong concern with literature and ideas. It is always easy to make our schools the whipping boy in this situation. They are expected to make us intelligent, virtuous, and law-abiding. And if they do not altogether succeed, the critics are quick to condemn them. On the contrary, we should applaud their accomplishments in the face of the difficulties which confront them. And if I seem to be joining in the general criticism, it is only because I can think of no other institution, not even the family and church, which is in such a logical position to wage the campaign against indifference to ideas and to what Howard Mumford Jones has called illiterature. but as one looks into the future, one cannot avoid a feeling of deep concern over the problem of education in this country. Ever since the end of the war, the birth rate has shot upward, and the number of children of school age has far outstripped our physical and teaching facilities. Today, nearly 1/4 of the entire population is in school, and we are threatened with a teacher shortage estimated at between 50,000 and 100,000 a year. At the very time when society demands more and better teachers, we are getting fewer of them, at least in relation to the number of pupils clamoring for admission to our schools. These facts simply underscore the gravity of the problem of mass education. They emphasize the importance of universities, colleges, and teacher training institutions as the ultimate sources from which our teachers are to come. However, even granting the ultimate solution of problems of teacher shortage, inadequate buildings, teaching materials, and the like, serious and significant reading and devotion to literature, art, and ideas, whether presented through print, film, records, or otherwise, is likely to be the prerogative of a minority of our population. It is this minority who will continue to make use of our libraries, public and academic. It is this minority who will help to keep alive the great tradition of Western culture and civilization. Therefore, I should like to conclude with some reference to the serious reader and to the crucial problem that confronts many of our libraries in their desire to serve him. By his very nature, the serious reader is something of a nonconformist. He has a curiosity about the unusual. He likes to pry into the unknown. He wants to find out, to stretch his mind, to explore new horizons. Having grown up in a society where the dignity of the individual is recognized as central, he exults in a personal freedom to roam intellectually. It does not even occur to him that there is something remarkable about his ability to do this. He takes it for granted, like his skin. To him, the library is a place where he can carry on the great conversation, as Mr. Hutchins calls it, with the seminal minds of civilization, or where he can learn what persons of lesser intellectual attainments and insights have to say. He does not run with the crowd. In fact, he is more likely to be a lone wolf, and he may even be regarded as a little queer because he is a little different. This uniqueness is something that totalitarian regimes cannot stand. The individual must be hammered into conformity, into a nodding acceptance of an approved pattern. Hitler's method was book burning. Soviet Russia's is strict state control of publishing and library book provision, methods which are anathema to any system like ours, which is based on the right of the individual to be different. Because the totalitarian viewpoint is so foreign to our basic philosophy and traditions, we must be continually alert to its intrusion under whatever guise. In recent years, we have all been made aware of attempts to control our reading and to deny to us the privilege of reading a book which some self-appointed arbiter considered dangerous. We do well to listen to the warning of Justice Learned Hand, the distinguished judge of the United States Circuit Court of Appeals. He said, "I had rather take my chance that some traitors will escape detection than spread abroad a spirit of general suspicion and distrust, which accepts rumor and gossip in place of undismayed and unintimidated inquiry. I believe that community is already in process of dissolution, where each man begins to eye his neighbor as a possible enemy, where nonconformity with the accepted creed, political as well as religious, is a mark of disaffection, where denunciation without specification or backing takes the place of evidence, where orthodoxy chokes freedom of dissent, where faith in the eventual supremacy of reason has become so timid that we dare not enter our convictions in the open lists to win or lose. It is true that the attacks on our libraries have not been numerous, but each one has served to spread a miasma of fear in many of them, so that the unorthodox book will not be acquired because it is unorthodox. It is, of course, possible for a library to avoid trouble by meekly surrendering to the prevailing winds of popular acceptance, by tempering its policy to the point where it buys nothing except the unexceptionable, where standards become keyed to the lowest common denominator of mass opinion. Surely the founders of our country and the progenitors of our schools, colleges, and libraries had no such timorous goals in view. They wanted our libraries to be real institutions of learning, where writers who dared to think otherwise would have an opportunity to be read, where the nonconformist would have a chance to learn, to commune with the thinkers and dreamers of the ages. The library which would serve its community well will never lose sight of the minority of serious readers who look to it for help and guidance. Such an institution will stand as a means to personal growth and intellectual development, and as a recognition of the worth of the individual. One of the characteristics of life today is noise. We are continually being prodded, shoved, wheedled, cajoled, argued with, persuaded. Every day of our lives we are urged to buy this shaving cream or that used car, or to vote for X rather than Y, or to favor high tariffs and oppose the United Nations. In this welter, the library stands out as a symbol of quiet, and its purpose has never been more eloquently and appropriately stated than by Gilbert Hyatt in his book entitled Man's Unconquerable Mind. Every library is an assertion of man's durable trust in intelligence as a protection against irrationalism, force, time, and death. A town or church or school without an adequate collection of books is only half alive. Indeed, libraries are far more necessary now than benefactors like Carnegie ever imagined, because in the constantly growing flood of useless and distracting appeals to our surface attention, rapidly written magazine articles, flimsy and fragmentary newspapers, and torrents of talk pouring from the radio, they provide a place to rest, be quiet, step off the moving platform of the moment, and think. It is to this high purpose that today we dedicate this splendid new addition to the Ball State Teachers College Library. Thank you very much.
I wish to express our appreciation to all of you who have come this evening to hear this challenging presentation by Dr. Karnofsky. I'm sure that the members of the legislature are here, and also some public-spirited citizens who have helped this campus to become what it is will not mind my saying that this is the kind of a ceremony I enjoy more than any other kind of an occasion on this campus. And I hope that in the very near future we shall have several more of them. Just another good dedicatory program for the buildings and the facilities that we need. Now, my program says that you are all cordially invited to step into the east wing of this library. It also says, and I think this is very interesting, that refreshments will be served on the third floor. That means that you have to go a greater distance than the first floor to see all of the library or to get any refreshments. We hope you will participate in both. Thank you for coming.